I invite everyone in this moment to just take a nice, deep, cleansing breath. And as you release the breath, allow the wave of love and light to just surround you. Take another nice, deep breath, filling your body with cool, calming oxygen. And as you release the breath, release all that no longer serves you. And as your body finds its own natural rhythm, just let it relax. Putting your day and your week aside and just letting everything go for now. Take this moment in this space to release all stress from your body and allow your mind to be here now. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. As we begin this inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner healing, acceptance, and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging this higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I am ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of this infinite presence, I simply speak these words. I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the feeling of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all of my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, I now say, I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only positive, constructive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose. I now center upon that one special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. visualizing that idea as already acted upon and brought to pass. In seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled and gratefully speak these words. I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me, I allow myself to relax in the peace of fulfillment and gratitude and say, I release. Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me. This can be a friend, a family member, a teacher or mentor, someone who has touched my life in deep and loving ways. Someone who may not be physically present in the room with me this morning. I turn toward that image in my mind's eye and say, I'm grateful for the good in your life. Now I open my eyes, turn to the world around me, and joyfully speak to anyone physically present in the room or virtually on this broadcast, and share in confidence and gratitude in saying, I'm grateful for the good in your lives.
I was I don't know when exactly, preparing to teach a history course. And I went in through the portal called Emma Curtis Hopkins, who is known as the teacher of teachers in New Thought. And I had heard that about her since I first came into this those many years ago. And how she had taught the founders of the different New Thought schools and a lot of other people besides, people who started magazines, because this was a big deal, periodicals. It was a big deal at that time in the early 20th century. And a name came across my field of vision of someone who had not started a New Thought school, not started a magazine, not published widely or accessibly, and her name was Henrietta Frances Lord. And I looked her up and found facsimile publications of her stuff, you know, where they basically photocopy it and put it in a new binding from the 1890s, and I lost my mind. This was, 7 or 8 years ago, I think, when I first encountered her. And I brought her to you. I brought her work to you. And I brought it, I remember especially to David Dewhurst. This was before he was Reverend David. And because she was English. And I said, you need to read this material. And it, to this day, because she only wrote really one fairly thick book, and then there's a second publication that's a summary of what's in the thick book, so it covers the same ground. But every time I open it, it's like one of those, it's like the Science of Mind textbook, or it's like, all due respect, it's like the Bible. Every time you open it, you see something new. I didn't know that was in there. And her work is just, I think it's written enlightening. So I brought a little for you today, and then I'm going to do what I do, which is riff on it, you know, and twist it out of all recognition, and probably deeply offend the memory of this woman as I say what I think she meant by, no, not really. I think we're very much on the same page. But today is about hardball metaphysics. Today is about hardball metaphysics, because anyone who ever crossed paths with Emma Curtis Hopkins played hardball when it came to the management of the mind. Zero slack was cut for the individual. This is the way, walk you in it, shall we say. Do you want to know? She creates a catechism here, little catechism, back and forth, Q&A. Do you want to know what holds the people in chains? It is the belief they are in bondage to evil and matter. Do you want to know how to free them? Speak them free. Do you want to know what words to use? Use the simplest that will convey your meaning. To wit, there is no power in evil. There is no power in matter. Good is the only real thing. In truth, we live and move and have our being. Do you want to know when to speak? Speak every day. Do you want to know how to reach people? As by a voice of thunder, speak in silence. Think the truth toward them. It has comforted lonely hearts in all ages to know that they could help in this way. Never mind how surrounded with cares or crushing ignorance or wealth felt to be a burden instead of a help. In silent thought, send the truth out night and morning from your hearts and homes and free the people. Isn't that excellent? How do you speak the word? You speak it in silence. What do? You send the word out. There is no reality to evil. There is really no reality to matter. That's a Christian Science idea. That's where she got her start. She came from England and encountered Christian Science, then encountered Emma Curtis Hopkins, who was an apostate of Christian Science, who went to Chicago and started her own work. Then she wound up in the Theosophical Society, and it was there that she met Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She was a British suffragist for women's right to vote. And she spoke either Danish or Norwegian, and nobody's sure which, because she translated Ibsen's Nora and A Doll's House out of the language it was written in, and there is still an argument among scholars to this day whether Ibsen originally wrote in Danish or Norwegian, because he was Norwegian, but Danish was the language of Norway in the same way that French was the language of the British Isles for some centuries. It was the higher language, the elevated scholarly sort of language. Where this woman learned Danish or Norwegian or both, nobody seems to know. Her past is shrouded in mystery. But when she crossed paths with first Mary Baker Eddy in Christian Science and then Emma Curtis Hopkins, her life changed. And she not only sort of regurgitated their ideas, but she styled them in a way that I just find captivating. I think she's a terrific writer. To me, a terrific writer is somebody where you can't predict the next word they're going to use, Well, I see where this is going, and they're going to say this, and they're going to say it this way, and they're going to use the customary vocabulary. She doesn't. Neither does Emma. She's creative. She's original in her thinking. But she's resolute. And that's why I bring it to you. She says there is no reality to matter, a Christian Science idea. And you know who else is saying that right now? Scientists, right? Quantum physicists. They're saying matter as a standalone entity, independent of consciousness or independent of powers that we don't understand, things that are beyond our reckoning at this point. Matter has no independent volition, no independent presence. The body that you wear is a soup of atoms held together by consciousness. In fact, there's a school of thought that says, you go to sleep one night, you get up in the morning, and you look in the mirror, like you were just singing about. You look in the mirror, and the fact that you're recognizable to yourself means that you've been held together by the consciousness that you took to bed with you. Our sense of self, our sense of identity is what holds us in this form, and it keeps us recognizable to each other and to our friends. And we see each other coming in, and the whole the whole world. It reminds me of a Marx Brothers skit where Harpo, you know, the silent one, he's leaning up against a building, and a cop comes along and he says, "You there, what do you think you're doing, holding up that building?" And Harpo pulls the cop, "Come away from there." The cop pulls away and the building falls down. You know, it's like the only thing that holds form in place is consciousness, which is why we work in consciousness when it's time to change form, when it's time to rearrange form. And so she says you send out a silent knowing. She also says that you don't involve yourself in the judgment of causation, particularly as a practitioner. All right, let me unspool that for you. She, like Emma and others, is writing not for the general public. That's why the general public typically hadn't heard of her. That's why you probably hadn't heard of her. She was writing for her peers, writing for other students of New Thought, other students of the so-called science religions who were coming up and wanted to practice, whether as formal practitioners who held licenses such as we have in religious science, or just working with your friends. So do you want to pray for other people? Here's how not to do it. Here's how not to pray for other people effectively. Now I realize everybody's entitled to pray however they want. I'm not going to tell you not to, and I don't think she would well, she might, but I'm not, going to say, no, you don't pray that way. Pray this way. Any kind of prayer is better than no prayer, so, go for it. However, the most efficacious form of prayer is to not involve yourself in causation. So that if you're a practitioner, which is anybody who's doing prayer for anybody else, they're praying, treating themselves about the other party, and the other party's good. If you are that person doing that, okay, here's what not to do. Get all involved in how they fell down that hole, how they got into that situation. How was this caused? Who's to blame? Are you to blame? Is somebody else not in the room to blame? Let's figure all this out. Let's have a long story back of all of this that explains why things wound up the way they are and you got here, Now, that's not a bad thing to do, but it's not what a practitioner does. It's what a friend does. If you go crying to a friend and you say, I have this terrible problem, the friend will say, tell me all about it, and they'll expect you to. And you will. And you'll start at the very beginning, which is a very good place to start. And you'll say, and then this happened, and then that person, and then this, and then that, and stuff. And then your friend, they feel like, well, they've really served you by hearing all that. And then you know what your friend is going to do? Give you some advice. Having heard all of this, well, now if I were you, since you're the one with the problem and I'm not, therefore I am a superior level of something to you, intellect or insight or perception, here's what I would do if I were you, and then you do it or you don't. But that's the friendly approach. Here's the practitioner's approach. There's nothing wrong. There never has been. In the place that I am speaking my word from, there is nothing wrong, and there never has been. There's just consciousness. There's just love. All there is love. All there is love, and I suppose the denial of love or the rejection of love, but that's not a real thing. That's not a thing. You know what I mean? That's a pretend sort of thing. That's just the trick of the light, is when you reject love and you say, well, I don't feel love. It's like closing your eyes and saying, well, the sun didn't come up today. Well, yes, it did. It's just you've made a decision to keep that at a distance, right? We do all these things. We wall ourselves up inside these stories that we tell ourselves with the truth of your being as pure unconditional love. So we speak the word from a place that does not dwell in the condition. And what sometimes happens is you'll do that and people will say, well, I thought you were my friend. and you wanted to hear my story. You say, well, I am your friend, but not right now. Right now I'm not being your friend. Right now I'm being your practitioner. And I'm treating from a place where nothing has ever been wrong. Why? Because if I treat from a place where things are about 35% wrong or 62% wrong or whatever, that's not effective prayer. All that is just swimming in the story. It just perpetuates the same thing. Yes, life is hard. Yes, you got a bad break. Yeah, I'm sorry. Basically, all you're saying is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry your life isn't working out the way you wish it were, Well, that's kind of ineffective, isn't it? It's kind of lame. Friendly, sure. Sympathetic, you bet. But it's not bringing the juice. It's not bringing the power to the situation. What is the power? There is one life. That life is source. That life is all the life there is. Now, am I saying do this all the time? This is the other question people have. I'm sure they had it for her, and they had it for her teachers and everyone else. Well, how am I supposed to do this all the time? For crying out loud, you're not. Okay? Let me just put it that way. You're not. It's not about going through this world and denying everything that you see and just knowing that there's one. I mean, if you can do that, if you can get away with that, if you can keep that up in your consciousness, I suppose good on you. And you probably go live in a hut on a mountain, and right kind of away from the world. And there are those people, and they're called anchorites, and they do wonderful things. But most of us have jobs and drive the roads and live in daily life. So you don't do this all the time. You do it in your prayer work. You do it in your spiritual time. So many people in their spiritual time, and I have found I'm as guilty of this as anybody else. I found myself doing it. So many people in their spiritual time sit there and worry and think they're doing something constructive. Sit there and think about, well, what if things go from bad to worse? Then what will I do? That's called careful planning. That's called looking ahead of the curve. That's called a lot of things, but what it's not is effective prayer. Effective prayer says there's nothing wrong, and there never has been in this place that I occupy in consciousness now, this mountaintop experience that I'm choosing to have, where I'm not giving myself advice, where I'm not looking for, eyeing possible exits, right? I'm not strategizing what to do when the floor opens up beneath my feet. I am living in trust. I am living in trust. How do you build this sort of trust? Well, it takes a while, frankly. I mean, some people jump right to it, but most of us, it takes a while. Why? Because we've been burned. We've been burned. We've been burned by other people. We've been burned by consequence, I guess you'd say, where you can't really assign blame to anybody. It's just stuff went sideways and you were there, And we've been burned by God. We've been angry at God. New thought draws a lot of people who are angry at God, so much so that when I say God, when I say the God word, sometimes people kind of seize up and stuff because they've been burned by shaking their fist at God. And when you shake your fist at God, the next thing you do is you duck because you expect to be struck down. So there's this mixed energy there of, God, you didn't come. Oh, wait, I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. And it's a whole, we expect to be punished. We expect to be smited by this power because that's how many of us have been taught, or that's the reading that we took away from the sacred books of the world or whatever. So it takes a while to build this conviction that things are on the right track and that they're heading, somewhere useful. How do you do that? Well, there was a meme that whenever I think of memes online that I've seen, I look at Lisa Ryan because she generates most of them. Most of them pass through her skillful fingers, working our social media here. And this one went something like, people care how much, something like people care what the consciousness that you model. They don't care about your opinion. It was a lot crisper and more elegant than that, but that was the gist of the thing, is about the opinion. So what you do to develop this trust in life, I believe, is you don't go to your opinion about the deity. You don't go to the world's opinion about the deity or what the gospel writers said or the Vedas or something, but you go to the deity. You go to the thing itself, which is what Ernest Holmes called it, the thing itself. You go to the thing itself and you say, show me who I am. Not your opinion about how it's going to operate, what it's going to do, how long this is going to take, and not your memory. And not your memory of what happened before. Because all of that is occurring on a somewhat objective level. You go to a subjective level. You go to the subjective level with this thing. And you say, I think it was Voltaire who said, oh God, if there is a God, save my soul if I have a soul. Wasn't that Voltaire? And so you go to this thing and you say, look, if you're there, and you really are all there is, and then step up, prove it. In fact, there is a passage. I'm pulling stuff out of wherever I'm pulling it out. In the Hebrew Testament, there's a prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will not open the windows of heaven and pour you out such a blessing there shall not be room enough to receive it. I think that's in the book of Malachi, one of the prophets. Prove me now herewith. Prove me now. I may have garbled this, so you can find it yourself. It could have been the one about bring all the tithes into the storehouse. I'm not sure. But anyway, the line stands out for me. Prove me now herewith. So go to this thing in consciousness and say, if you're really there, if this is really so, then take over. Then take over. Don't just meet me halfway. Go the whole way. Take over my life for me. If there is one benevolent power that occupies all space, then be thou my guide. All right? Be thou my guide. And when you do this, something profound and transformative happens that can also be somewhat uncomfortable because it involves separating us from the investment that we have in the opinions that we used to hold about how things are and what I think of as the compensating mechanisms. I'm going to get into this tomorrow night in this class that we're starting. Maybe not tomorrow night, but in the run of that class, we're going to get into this. We have sought out many inventions, the compensating mechanisms that we have, okay? For instance, in the song you heard a few moments ago, where it was talking about how, well, I hate myself, but I'm starting to love myself more, and all of this. Well, if people hate themselves or they're unhappy with themselves, down on themselves in any way at all, they can't let other people see this, and so they create compensating mechanisms, diversionary tactics, okay? I need smoke and mirrors, that kind of thing. I need you to not see me as I really am. And they get very invested in this, and they get very good at it, creating these kinds of things. Then metaphysics comes along, tells the people there's nothing wrong with you. There never has been anything wrong with you. And they're like, well, for crying out loud, I put all this time and energy into these compensating mechanisms. Now what am I supposed to do with them? Or as Emerson said, argue for your limitations and they're yours. And so we kind of keep wanting to argue for our limitations because we're good at defending ourselves against our supposed limitations. Does that make sense? It becomes a hobby. It becomes a hobby. I expect you to make me wrong. I'll make myself wrong first. Then I'll be impermeable to your attack, and it becomes this. And I tell you, folks, I've had people be angry at hearing that there's nothing wrong with them and there never has been, because they feel really betrayed by that idea because of so much energy having been put into its opposite complement. Well, it's not going to stop me from saying that. It's not going to stop this teaching. We're not going to back down on the teaching and say, okay, there is really something wrong with you. You know, but we can help, or we can sympathize with you, or we can give you advice about it. You know, we can give you advice about it. No, we're not going to do that. It's like God is either all there is or it isn't. And if it isn't, why are we here? Like in this room or on this video today. Why are we even doing this if God is not all there is? And if God is all there is, then where did everything else go? Where did all of the trouble and the upset and the conflict and the coping mechanisms and all of that go? So the idea here is, she has a line pulled out of, kind of out of context. You know, she says, love is when no memory frightens. And I just thought that was brilliant. There's so many things. How much has been said about love? How many greeting cards have you bought in your life that says love is this, love is a warm puppy, or love is a basket of roses, or love is, and see, what is the definition of love? Love is never having to say you're sorry. Oh, God, that movie. Oh, yeah. Haunted my youth. Right. I can hear the theme and all this stuff. It's so sad, you know. And the book was worse. Anyway, she doesn't say all those hearts and flowers and love is blue. That's another one from remember that? We should do that. Anyway, so love is when no memory frightens. And I thought that is singularly wonderful. Because when the memory frightens, you can't be fully present with the love. You got 1 foot out, right? 1 foot out of the situation. This could go wrong at any minute because it has before. Because it has before. And so, not just love in the sense of how we may usually think of it as romantic love or partnership love or something like that, but the love of what you do. The love of how you create. And, of course, I guess most of all, the love of self. When no memory frightens. I'm going to love myself enough, even though I could fail, even though I could fall on my face, even though this whole thing could come apart at the seams. Life won't come apart at the seams. All of creation is unmoved by the experience that I happen to be having in the moment. And so I can trust and forge ahead. And how a practitioner puts that is they'll say this or something better. This or something better. Say, well, what if I don't get that job? What if that person doesn't fall in love with me? Well, what if I, can't move to Spain like I'd hoped to and retire? Well, this or something better. This or something better will occur. Why? Because the overall containment system is infinite. And you introduce an impulse into it. And it takes it, and it runs with it, and it produces after its own kind. And it conducts you, using its patterning intelligence, it conducts you to a place where you encounter the good that you sought with some surprising features, always added on, so that the goal that you manifest is never exactly what you pictured in consciousness when you were busy dreaming it up. Otherwise, there would be no surprises in life. So there's always a nuance to it. There's always a little something extra added to it, or possibly taken away from it. It might be more streamlined and less complex than you thought. But the idea that I want to leave you with for this is this hardball metaphysics gets argued with in New Thought. And I'm in the middle of some conversations where that happens, and people will say, there's trouble in the world, and you can't just gloss over it. I absolutely agree. But for one time, one space, and that is in prayer. That is in prayer. All the troubles of the world we treat about. We're treating about Sudan this morning. We're treating about Louisville. We're treating about people who've been affected recently, suddenly, graphically in the news. We're treating about situations that exist in society that are untenable, of judgment and separation and condemnation of people and whole communities of people that we love. Okay? And nobody's saying don't pay any attention to that. Nobody's saying gloss over all of that in your daily life. But for one time, which is in the mountaintop experience of prayer, where you go to the place where nothing has been wrong, so that you're not, in effect, praying the problem and caught up in the emotion of it, caught up in being frightened, because the subconscious mind that receives the direct impress of our thought and acts upon it does not have the capacity, thank God, to sift through what we give it and sort it out and accept some of it and reject some of it. So if we hand it our fear, it says, fine, I'll take your fear. I'll see your fear. It's like, this is rude, but it's like a card player. I'll see your fear, and I'll raise it. I'll see your fear. I'll see your joy, and I'll raise it. It takes it, and it expands on it, what we give it in prayer. So you create a time for yourself where you screen out everything else, and you sit there, and you say words like, okay, one last thing. On silence, just pray in silence. Ernest Holmes prayed in silence, we were told, except when he was on stage, where he taught treatment. So I'm going to do what he did. I'm going to teach treatment by giving you some words, with the understanding that these words are my words. I have a lot of words. They're my words. You use your words. Don't try to use anybody else's words, because prayer is not a performance, you see. And you'll see people sometimes on TV and whatnot, and they get all worked up and break a sweat and all as they're praying, like it's really this arduous thing. That's a performance. It's good TV. I don't know if it's good prayer. I have to see what happens of it. But anyhow, there is one life, one power, one presence, pure spirit, everywhere manifesting, everywhere radiant, created this beautiful spring day where the cool breezes blow, and you can hear wind chimes, and you can hear songbirds, and there's squirrels darting up and down trees, and it is definitely springtime in this part of the world. And it feels so great, and it's a reminder that life begins again. Hallelujah. Life begins again. Over and over. Well, it begins for us every moment of every day. And I speak this word about a new beginning for each one of us, where we affirm and know that that which we desire to accomplish in this life is possible to us. Where we affirm and know that if we can envision a thing, we can inhabit it. That we are entitled by right of consciousness to be healthy, strong, even happy when challenged, even happy when feverishly creative, even happy when helping and serving others who appear to be struggling. I speak this word from a place of consciousness in which no struggle has ever been necessary, so as to bring back into ordinary everyday reality the recognition of a power that transcends all human limitations. And in the words of that wonderful spiritual teacher, Mary Baker Eddy, teacher of so many, herself, divine love has met and always will meet every human need. I affirm and know now that it is doing just that. And for this knowing, and the way that it manifests in form through each person here present each person watching online, and those whom we touch through our consciousness, the people that we know in our ever-widening circles. I affirm and know that this truth resounds throughout all creation, the life of each of these beloveds. I release this word now into law, calling it done, and so it is.
Time today. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this center. Online as well, thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in and being a part of us. We appreciate everything all of you give to us, your time, your energy, your love, your monetary donations. Everything you do to support this center is valued, and we are so truly grateful for you. And with that, I invite you now, as our little ushers, I have to give our little ushers credit, as they are in the back waiting. I invite you now to say with me, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I am and have, all the good I give and receive. I am prosperous now, and so it is.
So now I'm going to go back to Hey Jude, because I'm listening to the words of the song, and we're talking about letting her into our heart, letting her under our skin, and then it gets better, right? Well, what is her? Well, how about Sophia? Wisdom. You know how you get wisdom? Through experience. So let's go out and have some experiences with each other and gain that wisdom. And I hate to tell you this, but the most wisdom comes from when we, and I'm going to use air quotes here, fail. Because I'm going to tell you that in my definition, the only time you truly fail is when you quit. If you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep going, you haven't failed. You've just picked up experience, and that will become wisdom. So let's let wisdom under our skin for a minute. And know with me that there is one life, one power, one presence. There is one love. And each and every one of us are that divine channel for that love. We are the divine channel for that life. We literally are that presence. So I am encouraging you now to feel that presence. Just a little past the surface of your skin. Because it's a little bigger than we are. It's a lot bigger than we are. But feel that divine presence pulsing within you. Feel that infinite connection to infinite wisdom. And as you are connecting to that infinite source of love, of kindness, of compassion, of wisdom, of experience, of knowledge, let it flow through you. And as it flows through you, feel the healing that happens mentally, physically, emotionally. And feel it as it stitches up the world. So for our friends in Florida, as they dry out. For our friends in Louisville, as they grieve. For our friends everywhere where strange and weird and unusual things are happening, that we hold them in that wisdom, in that kindness, in that compassion. And we know that what they need is moving towards them now. That we know that the truth, the reality back of all of the stuff going on is pure, unadulterated love. Because that is what is the back of each and every one of us. And I am grateful to know this. I am grateful that there is a place that I can go where nothing has ever been wrong. Nothing ever will be wrong. Nothing ever can be wrong. I have access to this place by right of birth, just as each and every one of you do. And that we find it with grace and ease. And we spend the time we need there. And I am grateful for this place that teaches me this community that hold each other in that love. I'm grateful for our practitioners, our ministers, our musicians, the technology that allows us to do this. And I am grateful for each and every one of you. And I relax and release and know that it is so. And so it is.
So it is. Say with me now, something wonderful is happening through me.
Something wonderful is happening through me.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in everything I
I
am.
feel it in everything I am.
I choose it.
I choose it.
I trust it.
I trust it.
I use it.
I use it.
And I love it.
And I love it.
And so it is.
So it is.
So it is.